Welcome to Something to Talk About from the Bainbridge Island Senior Community Center, sponsored by Fieldstone Memory Care, Bainbridge Island. Fieldstone offers innovative and compassionate care. Now they're accepting residents down there at Rolling Bay. They also are offering day stay and respite programs, which is really needed here on the island. Call 360-689-4314 to schedule a tour of Fieldstone's beautifully appointed apartments on Rolling Bay today. And I'd also like to acknowledge that the Senior Community Center is on the ancestral homeland of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Suquamish people, the people of the clear salt water. We honor them. And we are so happy that today we get to visit with our friends from Eagle Harbor Bookstore, Jane Danielson and Victoria Irving. Thank you so much for being with us today. What do you have for us?
Lots and lots.
Lots and lots. We're going to start, and we know how to use our internet now.
Yay!
So we don't have another problem. We just want to start with some local authors. Most of the people we're talking about are right here on Bainbridge Island. Some of them are closer to Seattle. But we do want to mention, because this has been an incredible year for local writers. And so I want to start out with just a couple of those. And of course, the first one that came out in January, both of these two came out in January, the first part of the year. This is called The Final Case by David Guterson. And David, this is his newest novel. It's a return to the courtroom drama. There's a mystery, or there's not a mystery, it's sort of a legal conundrum. It's about a family who adopted a girl from Ethiopia into their existing family, and they're Christian fundamentalist parents, and the girl was badly neglected and mistreated and died. This book is based on an actual true case that happened here in the state of Washington. David studied it and explored it and went all over the state researching this case, and went as far as Ethiopia to learn more. And the other character in this book, there are two main characters. One is the father, who is the lawyer at the end of his career, an older man, and a younger novelist, his son, who has decided not to write novels, but he ends up helping his father just basically as a driver and as an assistant on this case. And we all think it's an homage to his father. And he gave us a talk here at the bookstore in March about this book. And it's just, it's a true David Guterson back to his original form, I would say. And again, a return to the courtroom. Quite good.
Small World by our own Jonathan Everson. I'm sure some of you have already picked this up and read it. He's a prolific writer, and each one is different and more interesting than the next, I think. Small World is sort of a story of the American dream and both our shames and our glories. And it skips across time, starting with people when people were enslaved, when the railroad is being built, and including into the future now. It follows a train ride from the Bay Area, supposedly up to Seattle, although the train has a wreck along the way. But it tells the stories, the interconnecting stories of a wide swath of American families. And it's a fabulous, fun read. I would say go for it.
This book, this is not a book for reading, it's more a book for enjoying. This is Private Gardens of the Pacific Northwest. It's just an absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous gardening book that came out just before Christmas. But if you're looking for inspiration, or you're just looking for a lovely book to have on hand that sort of showcases the Pacific Northwest, that's a very good one.
Well, I'll take one of these and Jane will do the other. John Woo Allen, another island treasure. this was his first book. Well, no, it wasn't his first book. He did another one earlier, but This Is Chance is a great story about that takes place around the big Alaska earthquake in the early 60s. And a female journalist who was key in sort of keeping the community together and reporting. She was also a mom with young kids at home. And it's just anyone who grew up during that time will love to hear this. And it's a story well told. And John is still writing, and Jane will tell you about this book.
Yeah, this is his newest book. It just came out this year. We had an event for him a couple of weeks, maybe about a week ago. John Mooallem is, as Victoria says, he's a journalist. He's a writer at large for the New York Times magazine. He's also a writer at large for the Atlantic. He has lots and lots of publications in various journals. He's a Bainbridge Islander, and this is a book of essays. And this book of essays talks about sort of the people he's encountered across the country, unusual situations that they have. Some of these essays involve him personally, and others are just remarkable people that live among us that you would otherwise not know about. I think it sort of tells us that everybody has a story. Every life is interesting. And I think what my takeaway from this book of essays was a sense of wonder about us, about the situations we get into. And just again, a return to that sense of wonder. What is this world all about? It's just a great, and the writing is wonderful.
I have to add that what I really love about John is I can always know that he's going to approach this from a different sort of perspective than, I always come away thinking, wow, this is an interesting way to look at it. And we adore him.
Yes. Steph Jagger is a local, she is a self-care coach. She is somebody who, she is a former champion skier. She travels the country doing inspirational talks. She's also written a couple of memoirs, and her latest one, Everything Left to Remember, is a gorgeous book. It's a memoir about her mother. She has a close family. Her mother is been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease and is a couple of years into the disease. And she wants to spend some time with her mother while her mother's memory is still there. And she takes her on a camping trip to Yellowstone. They do everything on this camping trip. And it's the way she writes, every sentence is a treasure. It's like prose, but it's also this gorgeous, gorgeous homage to her wonderful mother on this trip. And it's just glorious. And also you have the joy of the outdoors that the Northwest has to offer, the incredible national parks that we have. So do you want to do Headwaters?
I haven't read Headwaters yet, but this is a book by our friend Dylan Tamina. I don't know. Well, yeah. Anyway, this is about, he's a fly fisherman, and he's also a big advocate for fish and taking them away. Wait. Oh, I see I'm coming across right now as, something distracted me. A beautiful book, a reflection on his obsessions and his evolution as a fly fisherman. Some of you may remember his book, Closer to the Ground, which was the story of his family and how he was trying to help his kids understand and live and be part of the natural world. And this is kind of a continuation of that. I know it was somewhat inspirational. Can I ask you guys a question? Are these backwards to you, or are you actually able to see what these books are? Oh.
They look the right way to us.
Okay, good. Okay.
I'm going to mention two books by the author Nancy Blakey. Nancy Blakey is a Bainbridge Islander who writes books on outdoor adventures and getting outdoors, playing outside, which we all need to do more of. Her newest book is called The Mountains Are Calling, and this is an adventure guide for the Olympic and Cascade Mountains, what to do, how to get out there with your families, with yourself, how to have fun and enjoy the outdoors. She brings it all more accessible. And then she wrote a book called By the Shore, and it does the same things. So The Mountains Are Calling is about the mountains. By the Shore is an adventure guide for our own shores here, here in the Pacific Northwest, how to explore the Pacific Northwest coast like a local. Both of the books get us outdoors, and it's now high time for doing that now that we're not inundated with rain anymore. And so I just highly recommend these. And they're
great for grandkids and families and guests, and always full of good information and recipes and stuff too in By the Shore. House Lessons, another, well, she was originally Seattle based. Now she lives in Port Townsend. Erica Bauermeister, one of our favorites. She talks about the experience she and her husband had in moving up there, finding an old trash-filled house and making it something that they could rescue. And it's just a great story about architecture and human intersection with a home and a house. And it's just a wonderful ride of a story. And it talks about, sort of the homes that we forge as we go on. So great read, interesting. Thank you.
You want to do?
I haven't read this one yet.
So there are two authors I'm going to mention together, but first, Ray Posey is a bookseller here at Eagle Harbor Books. He moved here last summer from Baltimore, where he was an adjunct professor and was, he does a lot of work with teaching writing to prison populations. And he is now a bookseller here at Eagle Harbor Books. And we, of course, all adore him here on staff. But also, this book is something that everybody's going to want to know about if you don't already. It's out in hardback now. This paperback comes out next week. So it's hiding behind the scenes on our shelves. But he will have a book launch here on June 7th. He will, and so this is a World War II drama. If in the vein of All the Light We Cannot See, a glorious historical fiction of people in World War II. And he will be in conversation with Elise Hooper, who many of you are familiar with already. She's a popular book group choice for the Pacific Northwest. This is a book that takes place in Manila, again, during World War II, and the island becomes occupied by Japan. And so it is the story of a young war nurse who is living in Manila and has to deal with the situation of being occupied by a very brutal Japanese army. And so both of these books are World War II dramas. The two of them are going to be delightful in conversation. And so I highly recommend getting to know Ray Posey through coming here at the bookstore and also through his books. And Elise, you may, like I said, you may already know she has a number of.
I believe Elise has family on the island. I'm pretty sure. Also, Rafe, if you're in the store, is one of the best hand sellers. He's kind of quiet, but he makes great picks and connections for people. So come talk to Rafe.
This is any of you know Dinah Manoff? Dinah is the daughter of the well-known actress Lee Grant, but Dinah on her own is also a well-known actress. She was in the movie Grease. She won a Tony Award on Broadway for her work in a Neil Simon play. And she
had a TV series too.
She had a TV series. She was on that soap drama, which was hilarious, very funny soap opera, a parody of a soap opera. It was hilarious, ran for many years. And she wrote this book called The Real True Hollywood Story of Jackie Gold. And it chronicles a woman who is extremely famous. And in the opening scene, she's being chased by paparazzi and actually trying to get away from the paparazzi. She's injured. And the story is told sort of backwards from her memory as she's recovering from a coma in the hospital. So the story goes from some of the people who are watching her and hoping that she gets better, and also herself deep within the coma, chronicling her story. So, and I just want to mention one other local, this is a new local book. These are a writing group here on Bainbridge Island called the Winslow Writers, and they wrote a second edition of the short stories of Bainbridge Island. There's a group of local authors who have put their work together and published it in a small edition, and we carry it. It's flying out of the store. It's just came into the store about a month ago, and so if you're into short stories that you can read in short bites, this is a very, very good one for you, and it'll bring you, here to the island where which we all know and love. You'll recognize a lot of fun things in this book. So, where do we want to go now? Let's go.
I can get rid of mine real quick if you want.
While they're doing that, this is my daughter, Sheila, who's a pediatrician in Charlotte. She's going to be talking at the bookstore later on in June. And my other daughter is going to be interviewing. Anyway, I just thought I'd put a plug in for her. The name of her book is Happy Kids, or Healthy Kids and Happy Moms.
It's a great book.
Tom. Good job.
Yeah, you can find her event on our website. We have it on there now.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So I assume many of you folks are members of book groups. I have discovered since I retired in January that sort of the next most popular thing are walking groups. And I have the privilege of walking with Karen certain days. This is a book I just have so much fun with. 52 Ways to Walk. And it's 52 weeks, 52 for the weeks of the year. And it talks about different ways to move. It uses science to talk about walks. Everything like singing while you stroll and what effect that has on your walking and your immune system and quickening your pace. Walking hungry, getting your daily steps before breakfast cuts the risk of heart disease and type 2 diabetes. Amble amid trees. It's just, so week by week, it gives you something to focus on. You can skip around in the book. I love this book, and I've used it in my thinking as I go out on my walks, either with myself or with other people. So if you're in a walking group, take a peek.
This is a book that I adore because it is a lovely, it's not lovely, it's a wicked book about revenge. And I love a good revenge novel. This is about women who've reached a certain point in life and there's some magical realism. Suddenly they have powers to channel their anger, and they go after some of the evil men in their lives. And these men truly are, they're not just guys who've insulted them. These are people who are in behind the disappearance of young women. And so these three women are very different in their lives, but they get together and they go after these guys. And it is just a really fun romp of a book.
I love that.
Yeah, so I would recommend that.
Yeah, the old Irish saying, don't get mad, get even.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. I have never been a science fiction person in particular, but I have become one lately, in part because of a couple of books. I'll try to make this snappy. N.K. Jemisin is a very influential, relatively new writer. She's youngish, in other words. She's also African-American. This is a book that's both a love story to New York City and an exploration of quantum physics. If you know anything about New York, you will love this book. And it's going to be part of a trilogy. So this is the first one. It is in paperback now. It involves New York City, and it's 6 avatars, people who are chosen because the city is being birthed into being a living being. And so there's an avatar for each borough, person sort of picked unsuspectedly, and also one who represents the city as a whole. Great read. So that sort of got me into things. And then recently, Emily St. John Mandel, who's a very good writer, has a book out called The Sea of Tranquility. This is a book that deals with computers and augmented reality are we living in a simulation? Again, another fascinating book that skips through the timeline, comes together beautifully. She's a wonderful writer. Jane, take it away.
Yes, one of my favorite books that came out in the last year is called The Cloud Cuckoo Land. This is Anthony Doerr. This is the one who wrote All the Light We Cannot See and About Grace. And so Cloud Cuckoo Land is I think it's a masterpiece of a novel. I've never read anything quite like it. It has a spectacular ending, a twist towards the end. It follows 4 different stories in 4 different timelines from ancient days to the future. And but in each one, the characters are obsessed with an old ancient text, a mythological text that they become very, they're researching, they're trying to preserve. There are only a few copies left. And in each case, the groups of people think that their world is about to come to an end, that they're living in the end times. And in each case, there are librarians in the background. They're not the main part of the story, but the librarians are sort of the heroes of the story each time. So it's an homage to books. It's an homage to wonderful stories that travel through time. And I will say the ending is unbelievably good. And I just can't say, I can't say what it is because it would spoil it, but it's so very, very good.
I loved that book.
Wasn't it great?
Oh yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, oh good.
I have a question about one you mentioned before, which was Serious Face.
Yes.
Yes.
Is that like Jonathan Egan's books?
Like Timothy Egan?
I mean, Timothy Egan's books?
No, Timothy Egan is more of an historian. And he writes, you know, a lot about characters in history from the Northwest. And of course, he wrote his own memoir about traveling on a pilgrimage through Europe. But he's more of a historian. They do share the fact that they are both journalists and both very focused on and have told stories from the Northwest. But Jonathan Mooallem, some of his stories are historical in nature. He wrote about the Paradise Fire in this book of essays. And he's written about some people who have a matador back in history who he seems to resemble, and some other things. But it really is a book of essays. Trying to think who he might be.
He's sort of a philosopher too.
Yeah, you get that feeling.
Yeah.
I loved Egan's books.
Yes.
I think I've read every one of them.
Yep.
I wasn't wild about the police one from Mount Seattle, or Spokane, I guess it was. But the ones that tell about the different people who live in this area. As well. There's the two of them, that the first ones that he wrote.
Yes, right. This is more contemporary. John's books are contemporary books.
What was the name of that book, Malala, again?
Serious Face.
Serious Face.
Serious Face.
The brown book, where's that?
It's I just had it.
Okay.
I just like to throw in here that you were talking about that great book on walks, 52 walk notes.
52 ways
of course,
to walk.
I think you also carry a book by the Bainbridge Island couple, Dave and Alice Charette, who are senior center members, and we have talked to them before. And that might make a nice companion piece. It's what, 30 Walks on Bainbridge?
Yes, I just want to give some bad news about that title. We are down to our last couple of copies, and we can't get any more for another couple of months.
Supply chain, right?
Yeah, supply chain. The Bainbridge Island Land Trust produces that book, and it is in reprint. And so just as we're getting excited about getting out and walking again, the book has gone, has had a supply chain problem. So we will have it as soon as we can, but I would say 6 weeks or so before that one is back.
That book is perennially one of our best sellers, year after year after year. It's just, and when it's not available, like it is occasionally, it's just, our heart aches. But thanks for mentioning that. Yeah. That's good.
I think all the proceeds go to the land trust, don't they?
Yes. Yeah.
And he's also a very well-known fly fisherman. Wrote a column in the Sun for several years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Since we were talking about historical fiction, it's Sheila, right? Yeah. I know many people here are fans of Daniel James Brown, who did Boys in the Boat. This book that came out last year and is in paper book now is Facing the Mountain, an inspiring story of Japanese American patriots in World War II. Yeah. And again, it's just one of these wonderful looks at a historical event that goes, I mean, he is such a good reporter. It goes behind the scenes of these families, many of whom are boys from the Northwest. No, none from Bainbridge Island, but we can imagine, because certainly there were many from Bainbridge Island, who after being interned, taken to prison camps, basically, still joined the army or other forces and did some of the most heroic fighting over in Europe, and were, you know, very key in what they did. It also follows the story of, I'm going to blank on the name now, but of a conscientious objector from Seattle. So it hits all sides. And it's interesting how it talks about the difference of the boys from Hawaii versus the boys from the mainland, and how there was a cultural gap between them too. So very good book. If you love history and you love good storytelling, even though this is nonfiction, highly recommend this book.
I would too. I just finished reading in that, and it's fantastic. It's well written, very well written.
Yes, it is.
I'm just going to talk about a couple of blockbusters because why not? These are popular authors. Emma Stroud, who many of you know from her previous novels, has a new book out this time tomorrow, and this is about a woman who is about to celebrate her birthday, but she has a terrible relationship with her father, and she doesn't know where it went wrong. In her mind, she's wondering, you know, why is he like this, and when did it happen? And she wakes up the next morning, and she turns out to be in her 16-year-old self with her father, who's a very different man. And it's sort of one of these books is, if you had to do it again, what would you do differently? Would you do anything differently? And also, where are the turning points where things change in our lives? Emma is an incredible author, and I recommend this one.
She's a bookstore owner too.
She owns
Brooklyn.
A bookstore in New York.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm just going to talk about a couple of other real quick blockbusters. Jennifer Egan, who wrote a Visit from the Goon Squad, and more recently Manhattan Beach. I've not read this one yet, but it just looks like it's going to be super fun. She's an incredible writer, and I'm always astounded when I'm finished a book with her. It's like, how did she even do that?
Did she come in the store?
No,
oh, okay.
No. We have signed copies of that. And Ann Tyler, The French Braid. This is a family saga about a family on the East Coast. They're taking a vacation together, and they seem like this lovely family, but it turns out everybody's got problems and everybody's got issues, and everybody's trying to head off in a different direction, even though they have been a close family, but things are about to change. So this is a fun one.
I want to talk a little bit about my favorite book of last year, which was A Sentence by Louise Erdrich. Oh, I can't say enough for it. It's a book grounded in current events. I mean, it was written during the pandemic, and she definitely bases it in the pandemic. It's set in Minneapolis, which is where the author has a bookstore herself, and that bookstore and even the author are in the book. But it talks about the George Floyd murder, and but it's fun and full of love, and there's a ghost, and a lot of it's set in the bookstore. Very well done, and it's a very sort of contemporary novel that I think would interest anyone who's been living through these times, as we all have. Highly recommend it.
It's our book club's choice for June.
Oh, good.
I've read it. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Delia Ephron, many of you know Delia Ephron. She's the sister of Nora Ephron. She's a screenwriter and a novelist on her own. And she's written this book. It's a memoir, and it's a situation in which she was feeling the loss of her sister to cancer, another family member to cancer, and living in New York, and her internet goes out through some crazy thing, and she's just sort of flabbergasted by everything that's happening to her. And she still has a blog that she's writing, and her blog gets the attention of another man on the West Coast who she'd known years and years ago, but she didn't remember, but he always remembered her. And they end up, it's a love story. They meet each other. She's 72 years old, and he is a similar age. And it's this wonderful situation. And then she herself is diagnosed with leukemia. And so it's sort of like, oh no, when things are finally going so well, but she writes with a light touch. She writes with a bunch of empathy, and it's a gorgeous, gorgeous memoir. And it's about her friends who pulled her through, her new love who pulls her through, and just it's just a wonderful memoir. So I would definitely highly recommend that one.
I'll really quickly talk. This was another book that I really liked last year. This is not a book for everyone, but it's this luminous story steeped in hardship and dismal weather about a historical character. I mean, this woman did exist, Marie de France, who was the illegitimate sister of King Henry II of England. And in part of the power struggles that happened between family members and all, she was sent to become the prioress of an impoverished abbey, where she was outraged and unhappy at first, but she began to run this and love her sisters and love what she could do there and the community she could create. I also wanted to recommend, this is a book I listened to in addition to reading the physical book through our partner Libro.fm. I don't know if any of you do Audible books or audio books, but that is a organization that works only with independent bookstores. And is a great way to get your audiobooks if you can't get them from the library in time, and support your independent bookstores too. And the woman who reads this, oh my gosh, she's wonderful. Sometimes you get a whole new look at a book after you've read it when you listen to it. So I would highly recommend this as a good audiobook to read. But it is kind of tough. There's a lot about power that she unleashes, and she's unorthodox and defiant of the church in many ways. It's astonishing read. So go for it.
I'm just going to mention, since we recent events put women in the forefront again, women's issues. This is a book by Mary Beard. Mary Beard is an historian. She is a Cambridge professor. She lives in England. She's a TV personality there. She wrote the book SPQR, which has been on our staff rec wall for many, many years. This is a manifesto about women and power. It is she has made quite a statement about how women have been throughout the ages since the Odyssey, mythology. Women have been prevented and prohibited from equality and from roles of power, and they are in current days trolled and demeaned. And she has had it. This is a tiny little book. She's a wonderful essayist, and I think this is called Women in Power, a Manifesto. It's small, it's gifty. I think perhaps graduation season is coming up, might be a good choice. And but in general, it's one to have on your shelf. It's a quick read. It's an important book.
I'm going to let you do all these because this is Jane's pile.
Well, this one is maybe, I don't know. This is up Victoria's Alley. This is Cy Montgomery is an animal, a journalist who covers animals in the natural world. And she wrote the book Soul of an Octopus. She's written How to Be a Creature, which is a fun gift book. This is a book about hawks. She previously wrote one about hummingbirds too, right. But this one is about hawks, and she recently visited some falconers and became enthralled with the whole world of falconry, and especially a certain Harris hawk. For those who liked H is for hawk, this one is a small, very gifty book, very tiny in size, but packs a punch, I would say.
I think what I really like about Cy Montgomery, and I noticed this first in her book about the octopus, is she writes about science in a very accessible way. She's smart and gets it accurate. She has the admiration of those scientists, but you and I will understand it very well.
Yes, it's gorgeous too. Pretty book. I want to mention this is another memoir about Jeremy Denk. The book is called Every Good Boy Does Fine. And he wrote a book about, he was a child prodigy pianist. He makes his living as a concert pianist, travels around. He started out at 6 years old. They recognized his talent, and he taught, and he had a lovely time learning, as a child, learning piano. And then his family moved to New Mexico. He was uprooted from everything he knew. He had different teachers. There was some tension there. And then, after some time, he left for college, a whole group of different teachers. It's called, the subtitle is A Love Story in Music Lessons. And it's about the music. It's about the people who formed him, his talent, the teachers, his instructors. It's a glorious book, very well written. And for a music lover, I think it would be great.
How many people remember that Every Good Boy Does Fine from their piano lessons? Yeah.
Oh, yes, right. It's all the letters. Yeah.
There was another way to put it. Every good boy deserves fudge.
Oh,
that's the one we taught back on the East Coast or in Wisconsin. That's the one. That was a piano. I was a piano teacher. So yeah, I think we did fudge.
So this is Candace Millard has a brand new book out this week.
Yay,
she is one of my favorite historians. She wrote Destiny of the Republic in the past, which was about President Garfield. Incredible book that's under the radar, but everybody would, I think it's an amazing book about who Garfield would have been as a president, the man who assassinated him, all of that. She also wrote River of Doubt about Teddy Roosevelt's cruise down the ill-fated trip down the Amazon. She wrote, I forget the name of it.
Hero of the Empire.
Hero of the Empire, about Churchill in his young days during the Boer War. This is a book called River of the Gods. It's about the two men explorers who way back when they were both trying to become the first person who found the source of the Nile. And they were both well-regarded men in their times, and they were paired together on this journey. They did not like each other. Yeah, they did not like each other. But it's also the story of, similar to Edmund Hillary, he would never have made it up to the top without the Sherpa, Norgay. And in this book, there is a slave, an enslaved person who helps them along the journey. There were two separate journeys that they took. And there is a person in the background who was extraordinary and who would, the trip would not, they would not have had the success they had without him. So I'll mention that one. Also in the headlines, Unthinkable. This is Jamie Roskin, who is a congressman from New York, I believe. He wrote a book about he's on the January 6th committee, and he wrote a book about the January 6th insurrection. He is a man with, if you know him, he's been a congressman for a while, but he's also a father who recently lost his son to depression and suicide. And so he writes with an incredible amount of empathy, but also he's got some, he's upset. This is called Unthinkable: Trauma, Truth, and the Trials of American Democracy. Quite a good book. What else can I just want to mention some wonderful paperbacks that came out over the last year. And if you're looking for a good a good, satisfying read that is easily digestible and great.
I'll show these and you just.
Yeah, so that one is called The Anomaly by Hervé Letelier. I'm not pronouncing it right. It's a French name. This is a novel in translation from a French author. And The Anomaly was an international bestseller, as I've said. It takes place with 5 or 6 different groups of people, none of which are related in any way or have anything in common, except for the fact they were all on an airplane ride together from Paris to New York, which encountered some turbulence towards the end of the journey, some very severe turbulence, but they landed, they went fine. They all went on with their lives until about 8 weeks later, they were all confronted by FBI agents who took them into custody, and their life changed instantaneously. What happened on that flight? It's quite good. This is in a different vein. This is called The Narrowboat Summer. This is a novel of women friendships. These are 3 women who didn't know each other at all, but one of them had a narrowboat on the English, that goes up and down the English River. She had a business involving this boat that went around, and she encounters 2 other women. None of the 3 knew each other. One day they all had an interaction, and they realized that they liked each other very much. And the woman who owned the boat had to leave her boat and have some treatment for cancer. And she was putting it off because she couldn't leave her boat. So these other 2 women decide to help her out and to take on the business for the summer, running this narrowboat up and down the rivers. It's the story of these 3 lovely women. I think it's a great, great book.
Hamlet.
Hamlet is, have you read this one?
Oh yeah, I've heard this one too.
So you can talk about that.
This is the story. His name isn't mentioned, but William Shakespeare and his wife, and their early days and their children. And Hamlet was their son. And historically, Hamlet, their son died during the Black Death. What's wonderful is this story is really focused on Agnes, who is Anne, and she's kind of this wild creature, sort of like almost, I mean, she's a master at herbs and things like that, is, somewhat, suspicious, looked at suspiciously by some of her family and all. But anyway, an amazing story, an attentive story, historically very interesting. How many of you guys have read this already? Yeah, it's fabulous.
Absolutely fabulous. I'm going to mention 2 books by one of my new favorite authors. Her name is Silvia Moreno Garcia.
Oh, yeah.
She wrote the recent book in paperback is called Mexican Gothic. And Mexican Gothic is a sort of a retelling of the Jane Eyre story. It takes place in a creepy home in a Mexican village. Wealthy landowner and his creepy home and his creepy servants, and very much a retelling of Jane Eyre. I highly recommend it. It'll suck you right in, right to the last page. Very, very good. And she wrote another novel before that called The Gods of Jade and Shadow. And in this case, this is a retelling of some Mexican mythology, including some of the ancient mythology from Mexico. And this is sort of a story of Pandora's box. But it follows a young woman who opens a mysterious box, and out jumps a Mexican god who's been in there forever. And he has a mission that she has to help him carry out. And it's very, very good. And then I just want to mention some fun. I love cozy mysteries. I love just a lighthearted mystery to solve. And so I just wanted to mention a few that you may not know about. Everybody knows, Jacqueline Winspear, the Maisie Dobbs, Louise Penny, the Inspector Gamache, Anne Cleves, her stories. So if you're fans of those, you might like some of these other books. Marty Wingate, this is a book called Bodies in the Library. Marty Wingate is a Seattle personality. She has been on the radio for years, was on one of the KUOW weekly talk shows, just sort of chronicling the, you know, stories of the day. But she also has written a series of cozy mysteries set in an academic society in Bath, England. And it's sort of a folio organization and dedicated to ancient novels, mystery novels. And of course, the young woman from the States ends up there, working there, and finds a body in the library. So Ellie Griffiths is another British novelist. She writes a series called the Ruth Gallagher Mysteries. Ruth is an archaeologist of ancient bones. She's a world expert on ancient bones. She lives near Cornwall, where there are bogs and where bones are sometimes come up, and sometimes the bones are not as ancient as she's called out for any ancient bones. Many times they're not ancient. And then it's a very delightful cast of characters in this little village where she lives. And she becomes very much involved in the local police inspector, maybe too involved. But it's wonderful. And this is the most recent one. There must be 12 of them by now. This is, I'll mention, this is a series, The Old Cold Grave by Iona Wishaw, W-I-S-H-A-W. It's set in British Columbia. And it follows, Lane Winslow, follows a young woman who arrives in British Columbia from the UK just after World War II. And in World War II, she was a spy for the British in occupied France. She was made to, her job gave her some skills that most women of the day didn't have, and some adventures. And she's not allowed to talk about it because she's under a secrecy act that, you know, she was with British intelligence. Anyway, she comes out to get away from, leave that life behind and move to British Columbia, this lovely little town on a lake. And of course she finds a body in her yard one day, behind her yard. And there's an intriguing and lovely Inspector Darling in the town who doesn't quite know what's going on with this woman because he knows there's a bigger story than what he can tell. And her spy days won't leave her behind. The Brits want her back in a big way, and they have to get involved and mess things up as well. So it's sort of John le Carré meets Agatha Christie. It's very good, and not many people know about this series. It's quite good. And another series, this is the second book in the series, Marion Lane and the Deadly Rose. The first one was Marion Lane and the Midnight Murder. For those of you who liked, I find this to be sort of, it reminded me a bit of Harry Potter. These are young people in England who are sort of engineers. This is a group that makes spy gadgets and helps British intelligence during the war and days surrounding the war. And it's sort of like James Bond and the guy Q who makes all these crazy gadgets for the spies to use. This is a group of youngsters, young adults who are recruited to be engineers, and every day they descend into subterranean England, where there's an academy down there that they're all taking classes, and some of them live down there. It's very much like Harry Potter, I thought, except there's no wizardry or magic involved. These are gadgets, and there's spy and intrigue, and can they trust the instructors? Can they trust their fellow people? There's nefarious people down there, and then there's good people. And so you got to try to figure out who's who. It's really fun. And the last one I'll mention, this is not a series, but this is a cozy mystery about a maid in a fancy hotel she's basically autistic, but doesn't say that. She very much likes her job. She very much tries very hard to return each room to perfection. And there are hotel staff that are sort of intriguing. And of course, she finds a body in one of the rooms that she's cleaning one day. And there's a mystery about that. But it's absolutely delightful. And again, she's not quite sure who to trust, but it's a very fun read.
I'd like to add, and I don't have it in front of me, but I'm sure many of you have read the Thursday Murder Club.
Oh, yeah.
Raise your hand. Again, another British author. And I read it out loud because I can just hear these little, it's set in a senior living community, and the bodies pile up, and it's got this very diverse group there. The Murder Club meets every Thursday to discuss cold cases, and a real live one is dropped right in their midst. So good fun.
So how much time do we have? Are there?
Well, we have about 6 minutes. Could we take some questions?
Yeah.
Tom.
Well, I just wanted to comment. I read that book, The Thursday Murder Club.
Yeah.
And it's great. And they came out with another one, which I bought and read. And it also was very good.
Yeah.
So I will add my recommendation to that.
Yeah.
Sounds like Daisy's given a recommendation too.
Oh, yes.
Daisy's barking. I know.
Yes.
I don't know how many of you know about these two books. There's a book called The Elderly Lady is Up to No Good, and a sequel called The Elderly Lady Must Not Be Crossed. And these are two books of suspense, I guess you would say, written by Helene Thurston, who is she writes police procedurals of a female detective in Scandinavia. She writes deep, dark Scandinavian noir. And she, but for some reason, for her friends one year for Christmas, she wrote about an older lady in Sweden who gets away with the worst of crimes. And you do not want to cross this woman. Nobody really notices her. Her superpower is being just an elderly lady who passes, nobody even notices her. And yet, if you cross her path in the wrong way, you better watch out. And the first one was they're quite wicked. I think there's a lot of dark humor in there. The murders are not necessarily cozy, but they're fun. Some of them are funny, and I absolutely love them. They're both small little hardbacks, very gifty, and quite good for birthdays. Although I will say I gave it to my mother-in-law recently, who was 91. And she thought it was going to be a lighthearted, hilarious romp of a book. And it is really a dark humor book. And so, but they are delightful.
Who's the author?
Her name is Helene, Helene, Thurston, Tursten, I think.
And you have it there?
Yeah, an elderly woman is up to no good. Yeah.
Wow. And just remember, this is going to be on YouTube. So if you need to come back and reference these books and authors, just come hit the YouTube, Reed will get it edited and put up. So just want to let you know that.
I'll mention one other book that is coming up because Tom mentioned an upcoming event. We have another upcoming event by an author named William Alexander, who just moved to Bainbridge Island from I think the New Jersey area, somewhere East Coast, mid-Atlantic area. He's just moved to Bainbridge, and he is the author of a book from a few years ago called The $64 Tomato.
Oh, yeah.
And he's written another book called 10 Tomatoes That Changed the World. For gardeners, I think it's going to be fun, but it talks about the tomatoes' arrival in Europe and who brought it there, and the earliest record they can find of it, and how English people really didn't like it at first. I mean, it had an odd taste. It didn't stand up. It didn't hold its shape. It wasn't as nice a variety as what we have now, and it took about 300 years. But once it took off, it really took off, and it's just a very funny story about one plant's history throughout the world, and it's just really a fun one. So I would say that's a good one. So check our website for that and other really fun events that are coming up.
Yes,
yeah,
definitely. Lots of great information on your website.
Oh yeah, well, great. Well, are there any other questions about The bookstore?
I don't have anything other than I know I'm going to the library very shortly.
Oh, good. Yeah. You got your list.
You know, I did want to mention one book. I've gotten into Kruger, and I just finished reading Ordinary Grace. It's been out for years. That is one of the most extraordinary little books I've read in a long time.
It's a very good writer.
Another great writer of the Northwest, you know, it's just incredible. He's another great writer.
Yes.
You mentioned Timothy Egan. He came out with something during the pandemic that didn't get a lot of press because it was during the pandemic, but it's about his walk on the Francigena Trail through from England to Rome.
It was beautiful. Absolutely fantastic little book.
I know.
Yeah, I like that book.
Yeah, it was very good.
He's great though. Egan, like I said before, I've read everything by him. It comes out, I grab it.
Yeah, exactly.
So many books, so little time.
Yes, I mentioned one book to keep on your radar that's coming up in August, so there's plenty of time. But Jamie Ford, who is the author of Hotel on Bitter and Sweet, he has a book of stories coming out in August. Of course,
it's called The Many Daughters of Afong Moy.
Yeah,
and it's a fascinating story, sort of centering on the interesting idea of epigenetics, which means that historically things that happen are sometimes expressed into the genes too. So again, Afong Moy was a real life historical person who was the first Japanese or Chinese woman to come to the United States, and it follows her descendants. Fascinating book. Goes about 50 years to about 50 years in our future, a little bit more, but yeah, very good read.
Very good read. And then the other one is Susan Wiggs. I didn't mention her with the rest of the Northwest authors because we just sold out of her book. She wrote a book last year called The Bookshop of Lost and Found. A book with some intrigue and a mysterious building in which a young woman who's facing some tragedy, but inherits a bookshop that is in need of renovation for the building itself and for the business. She's struggling along, but a lovely cast of characters. Of course, there's a couple of hunky helpers in there, and the bookshop itself has secrets within its walls that she's learning about, and it's absolutely wonderful. And she comes out with a new one later this year called Sugar and Salt, and this is about set in the same place in San Francisco, and this business is across the street, and it's a young woman who comes from Texas to San Francisco. She opens a restaurant there. She's a very good. It has the theme of is barbecue. But of course, next door there's a candy store, and so that's where the Sugar and Salt name comes in. And again, sort of a tension between two characters: the man who owns the candy store and herself. And there's some troubling issues in her background. Susan is bringing more and more issues from the headlines into her novels. She was known as a romance writer. I would not categorize these as romance. They're more dramas, contemporary dramas. And I would say definitely The Lost and Found Bookshop is a fun read, and Sugar and Salt, I'm almost to the end of it. I don't know how it's going to come out, but I'm enjoying it very, very much. And Susan she's just a great storyteller. So.
Excellent. Hey, listen, I just hope Jane and Victoria, you come back and visit us again. You are such a wealth of knowledge, and we just always love it when you come to visit it. So thank you so much. And visit the Eagle Harbor, bookstore. It's such a wonderful store. I get in there, I get lost, and and everybody that works there, we just love you guys. So
and we're on the Fob Friday.
Yes, and you're on Fob Friday, so 10% on Fridays. Take your fob, show it, and So we just love you guys, and what would we be without you? So thank you so much. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you all. The Senior Center is such a treasure here, and you guys are really doing a great job.